Good morning, I'm Leigh Sullivan from the University of Canberra, and I'm here discussing the week in politics with Michelle Grattan. Good morning, Michelle.
Hi, Leigh.
Michelle, this week Alan Jones, the radio shock jock, accused the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, of failing the immediate needs of drought-stricken farmers. This came amongst the already increasing criticism of the government's drought policy. Yesterday, though, the government announced a new lump sum payment for up to $13,000 for farmers reaching the end of their eligibility for the farm household allowance. Is this new scheme going to be enough to take the pressure off the government when it comes to the drought?
Looked at in one way, this is just a 6-month extension for these people of this payment. So it's not as dramatic as the government would like to present it as. But I think it won't be enough. I think that drought policy is still very much a work in progress for the government and for the stakeholders, including, of course, drought-stricken farmers who are really getting to the end of their tether. But what you can do is, by the same token, limited. You can't protect people forever and comprehensively in a drought. And a number of farms go under, and that is the reality of the very harsh climate that we live in.
Another bit of bad news for the government is that the IMF has cut projected growth rates for Australia back to 1.7%. Now, the IMF has also called on the government to use budget spending and structural reforms to boost the economy. However, has the Prime Minister during question time this week rejected such calls? Is the government's unshakable commitment to maintaining a budget surplus doing more damage than good?
There's a lot of debate about whether the government should move now or whether it can afford to wait for a while to put more stimulus into the economy. As you know, of course, the Reserve Bank Governor has been urging the government for some time to take additional measures, but so far the government has resisted that call, resisted calls from business and others. It really, really wants to get to that projected surplus this financial year. Having said that, if things are looking worse in the next few months, I think that the government will have to compromise.
A new report from Democracy 2025, which is a collaboration between the Museum of Australian Democracy and the University of Canberra, reveals how politicians view the trust divide in politics. One of the really interesting findings, I think, is that politicians view our democracy much more favourably than do our citizens. Why is this the case?
I think it's a case of insiders versus outsiders, that the politicians are responsible for running the political system, as it were, and they feel comfortable, they feel empowered. What we've seen over recent years, indeed recent decades, is that the public have become increasingly distrustful of institutions, especially political institutions. So in this survey, what we found was that when you asked what was wrong with the system, what criticisms people had, the politicians were more in favour of tinkering and did not have such swingeing criticisms as the general public. The general public would like more control over politicians, more accountability, and less adversarial politics.
And now onto an issue that we've been following in this series. An inquiry into the head office of New South Wales Labor has announced, after the weeks of shocking revelations about handling of foreign donations, namely the infamous $100,000 that was delivered in a shopping bag by a Chinese property developer.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
He denies it, but there seemed to be a lot of evidence that it happened.
Indeed. What form will this review take, and when can we expect to hear back from them?
It's being done by former Labor Federal Attorney General Michael Lavarch, and the idea is to have it done pretty quickly. There are 2 stages to it. The first stage will look at the role of the General Secretary of the New South Wales branch. The evidence presented to ICAC has really discredited the past 2 General Secretaries, and one has finally cut the ties, or the ties been cut this week and departed. forward, but then there'll be a wider look at the whole operation of the New South Wales head office. This has been, of course, always a very powerful branch in the ALP, right dominated, and a powerful head office. And what we've seen, according to the evidence that has been presented to ICAC, is that things really ran off the rails in a dramatic way in terms of handling and raising donations. So this review was announced by both the state leader and federal leader Anthony Albanese. I think it's absolutely necessary that really there's a root and branch clean out of this section of the ALP, because in the public mind it's just such a dreadful look as to what's happened.
Indeed. Well, look, yet another fascinating week in politics, Michelle, and I look forward to the discussions next week.
Thanks a lot, Leigh.
Thank you.